Well, welcome to another Friday night. When you think of the word strength, success, greatness, what I want you to begin to think through is we use those words all the time in our culture today without realizing that we use different definitions of those words. And what I want you to see is the definition of the word is really dependent on what vagal state that you're in. The ventral vagal state, where you're safe, connected, you're able to be totally human, explore your emotions, that's where you get an accurate definition of strength, an accurate definition of greatness, of success. The other two vagal states, they have definitions of strength, greatness, and success, but they're about surviving. They're not about meaningful relationships, finding true, healthy joy. So it's really important to think these three vagal states through and the definitions that they have of strength, success, and greatness. So let's start with the ventral vagal state. So how is strength defined in the ventral vagal state? It's having the tools and ability to stay connected, both to myself and to other people. So connection is the priority. It's the core, the basis of meaningful life, of joy. And so that becomes really what strength is maintaining that. That means I'm able to stay present to myself and others under stress. That means I'm able to experience all of the emotions. It means I'm able to live in relationships out of a place of love, not fear. So I'm doing stuff not out of fear to protect myself, to survive, to get stuff, but with no strings attached. I'm able to be open and vulnerable in relationships without fear of collapsing. I'm able to be flexible and to adapt to each person's nervous system and what their personality and different situations without needing that rigid stuff. And I'm able to help others, those in need. So that's strength. And you can see it's very much got a vulnerable, emotional, a warm side to it that is very important. And so what's values within that ventral vagal state is that mark greatness, that mark strength is fairness, respect, kindness, empathy, nurture, authenticity, connection, safety, security, consistency, stability. And it's repelled by cruelty, injustice, corruption, abuse of any kind, and abuse of authority. So that's strength within that. So what about then success and greatness? Well, in your ventral vagal state, success is where you live in alignment with your values. You treat others the way you want to be treated. Success is having meaningful relationships of connection, with some relationships that have deep intimacy. Success is contributing to others, helping others succeed. Success is deepening my inner life. It's not about dominating other people. Success is learning to meet my 12 needs so that I can sustain being healthy and being in a state of well-being. Success is finding work that is purposeful, that's in line with my talents and my personality. It's not so much about wealth and position, but about purpose. So greatness is how I show up, not how I rank. It's about being able to be authentic, to fulfill my passions and my gifts and abilities. Success is finding a life that fits me It's not about impressing others or conforming to what others want. So that's the ventral vagal state. Now let's go to the sympathetic vagal state when you're in fight or flight, when you feel danger, when you are now in survival mode. What then marks the definition of strength? It's being tough. It's being unbreakable. It's being dominant and winning. It's about never showing any weakness or being vulnerable. It's not, so therefore you don't show weak emotions, because then people could take advantage of that. So you have to suppress weak emotions. You push through at any cost. You can never give in to weaknesses. So it's about power and about anything that would make you less able to conquer others, to protect yourself, that might get you hurt in situations. And so basically, it's if I don't stay strong physically, in an emotionally invulnerable state, intellectually, then I will get hurt. I will lose. So how then do you define a success or greatness? Well, I have to be better than everybody. I got to be exceptional. I got to be superior. I must be admired by others, respected by others. I must stand out above others. So that means I must always win, never be wrong, never admit that I'm wrong. I must always look good. Now it's about how others perceive me, my image, that they see me as superior. So I must then prove my superiority, my worth, through my achievements. So I now will have external markers of achievement. That could be my money, it could be my position or status, my power and control. It could be that others recognize me. So it's all about my external image, what I present. It's not about my internal life and how healthy it is. It's how successful I look on the outside. So to matter, to succeed, to be great, I must rise above. And that always means I must constantly move forward. Because if I slow down, if I drop my guard, somebody else will pass me. Somebody else will defeat me. So let me take this a little bit farther, because this one to me is so important to understand. If you look at that kind of person in their sympathetic vagal state, and they've suppressed anything that appears weak, emotions, parts of themselves, and it's all about power and being strong, they appear to be superhuman. That's how they tend to think of themselves, when actually they're less human. They have suppressed the parts of themselves that make relationships possible, that make us nurturing, loving people that can attach. So they have had to suppress those in order to be strong, to survive, to not be defeated in battle, in fights, in contests. But they've had to suppress many parts of what make them truly human. So let me just get you to think about that. In order to survive, they've had to suppress connection. They've had to stop trusting others. They couldn't be authentic. They've had to suppress empathy and love and those warm, nurturing emotions, grief, sadness. All of that makes them weak. And in some cases, they've even had to suppress their conscience. So you can't listen to your conscience, because then you might be held to a moral code, and that'll make you weak. You gotta just survive. That's the higher priority. You can't care about people, because then that'll make you weak. that others can then use that against you to manipulate you, to get you to do stuff, because you'll do it because you don't want to lose those you've come to love. So you basically pull into yourself, stop attachments, harden yourself, close your heart. That's how you be strong. But you've lost intimate relationships. You've lost deep joy. So let me take it farther. People in the sympathetic state have shut down the things that make intimate relationships healthy and really meaningful. But they still desire love. They still desire connection. They still desire the aspects of an intimate relationship. So what do they do when they don't have the ingredients for that because they're in their sympathetic state? They now do pseudo love, pseudo connection. They learn to fawn. That looks like love. They learn to have fake intimacy through laughter, through one topic of interest, all those different types of things. They do lots of things together, fun games and sports and activities. They don't ever get vulnerable. They don't ever show their weaker emotions. They just appear strong, but they try to create the feelings of connection and the things that feel like love. That is all they've got. And so what I hope you can see is that might give you what feels like a relationship, but it'll never be a true, satisfying relationship of deep connection and deep intimacy. You don't get the genuine article where the real needs are met. And that is why so many struggle. And so what's underneath all of this? There's deep fear. A deep fear that if you see the real me, you're going to reject me. A deep fear that I will get hurt if I allow connection. And so there's shame. There's deep fear. There's fear of losing control because then I'm going to get hurt. And so there's this deep need to secure safety, love, and respect, but not through the right means. You now try to do it through external performance, through power, through control. So let's go to the final one, your dorsal vagal state. So picture here, this is a person that has got so much pain, so many problems, they can't resolve them. Fight and flight don't work. So they have only one option: shut her down, freeze, retreat into a safe internal world where you just block out the external world. Think of a culture where people have lived with oppression and brutality against them for years, constant pain, hardship that they can't resolve. You end up with a culture where people just get to the place where they live in their dorsal vagal state. They learn to fawn, but they're disconnected. They've given up hope. They're in a victim mentality that they can never improve their position. So how do they define strength? Well, strength is being able to endure, to tolerate. Strength is not feeling, shutting down your feelings. Strength is not needing anything. Strength is getting through a day without stumbling, without failing, without falling apart. Strength is surviving without breaking. So that looks like emotional numbness, but that's framed as, oh, I'm good. Or that looks like extreme independence, but it's framed as, I don't need anybody. I'm strong. And so it's just this plodding, quiet, desperate persistence, but always feeling tired. So how then do they define greatness, success? This is the people that now greatness is being a martyr, the ability to endure pain and hardship without complaining. That is now set up as the goal, the model, the desired characteristic. Then greatness is never being a burden to others or staying invisible, never making demands or having needs. Greatness is avoiding failure, avoiding being exposed. It's staying out of trouble. It's not making things worse. Some even pride themselves on avoiding risk altogether, just staying safe and in a comfortable little comfort zone. So you don't try anything because you just want to avoid failure and being seen. So success is just about surviving without making things worse. So here's what I want us to see. All three have a definition of strength, success, greatness. All of those then end up having values, deep values inside that are very different. Do you see that your values are not just something you choose in a vacuum? Your values are what you figure out you need to have as the basis of your life to do well at that type of life. So if you're in survival mode, you develop values that enable you to survive well, whether it's in your sympathetic state or in your dorsal vagal state, to feel good about yourself. If you're in your ventral, you develop values around connection, a meaningful life, a meaningful relationship. And so if you are in your sympathetic state or your dorsal state and you realize, wow, I've got the wrong definitions of success. I've got the right ones for being in this state, but I don't have the right ones for a truly meaningful life in the ventral vagal state, and I've got the wrong values for that. What you have to begin to realize is I need to get back to learning to find safety, safe people, connection. And as I do that and regulate the triggers and the emotions, I will find my values begin to shift. I will find my definitions begin to shift. But I first got to provide the right environment for my nervous system before all of that will happen. Now, let me say two final things. I've worked with soldiers, veterans, police in very stressful situations. And many of them in their jobs are in their sympathetic vagal state. They're in survival mode. They got to be strong. They got to deal with a whole bunch of stuff. They can't let weak emotions out. They can't be vulnerable. They stay there all the time, though. And so think of a soldier who's been in war for several tours, and they get validated for being so strong, for being so ice in their veins, that nothing bothers them. And they're considered just to be an excellent soldier because of that. They don't have any weaknesses. But then they come home and they have a family. They have a spouse. They have children. Now what do? If they stay in their sympathetic state, which got them all kinds of validation on the battlefield, but now if they're in their sympathetic state at home, they're not going to connect. They're going to do damage to their children, to their spouse. But for them to go to their ventral vagal state and be vulnerable, to show those emotions that in their sympathetic state they despise, they look down upon, that feels wrong. That feels weird. And that's where many find themselves in a dilemma. That on the battlefield, they got to live in one state, but if they don't accept that to be successful at home, they got to live in a ventral vagal state with different values and open up parts of themselves that they had to close down. If they don't do that, they are not going to be successful as a parent or as a spouse. Final thing, think of your culture. How does your culture define strength, greatness, and success? If your culture defines strength, greatness, and success. That's really the definition used by people in their sympathetic state. Or the martyr type of culture that you just survive and be strong, the dorsal vagal state. Those are not cultures that are as healthy as they should be. In fact, those are cultures that are going to be creating complex trauma within the culture. You need a culture that defines greatness, strength, not by dorsal or sympathetic, but by ventral vagal. That is a healthy culture. Well, I hope that just gives you some important stuff to think about that will help you in processing your own life and what's going on deep inside of you.